Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the State of Freedom. Today is Thursday, August 28th. It's 10 a.m. Central. Well, just a couple minutes after that, we are running late because of some tech gremlins that got us this morning, but we won't be deterred. I'm Danielle Walker, and I am not, unfortunately, joined today by my good friend and co-host Chris Alexander. He is out sick, but he does send his love to all of you. And we're coming to you live on Voice of the People, USA TV and Radio Network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Wherever you're watching, please give us a like, a thumbs up, and share it. Retweet it. It helps us so much gain visibility. It helps us with the algorithms. Comment in the chat. We love hearing your thoughts. We want you to engage with us here today. Well, today I am joined by a friend of the show, Juan07. He is back from some travels, and we are going to be getting his insights on the chemtrails, geoengineering issue, as well as the latest on election integrity at the federal level as we keep fighting that fight here at home. And we will be digging into the ongoing exposure of deep state corruption as well. I'm sure we'll touch on that if we have time. And so Juan is joining by phone today because he is a man in motion. Welcome to the show, Juan.
Hey, I'm in the vehicle driving, and as I was going along, there was 4 protesters on the overpass on a bridge that we just went under, and they had signs, tax the rich and say yes to socialism, okay? So I said, okay, we got to go back and get a picture of that. And so we're headed back to go get a picture. They only protested probably for, who knows, a few minutes or something. They had their little sheets with all up there. I just wonder if George Soros is actually getting his money worth. Did he pay him for an all-day protest? Or was it, half an hour? Or are they roving protesters? They protest for 15 minutes here, change locations, make it look like there's more of them than there are?
It's a solid question, but the truth is we know that they're not showing up for real work today.
Oh yeah. I was looking at them just thinking, oh my gosh. I mean, and there's 4 of them on the freeway overpass. I don't know that all these people are headed for work in the morning. Tax the rich. I bet you about 99.99999% of the people that drove under that were like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so crazy. Well, Juan, before we get into it, let me read the scripture of the day. It's 1 John 1 verses 5 through 10. And this is what it says. This is the life-giving message we heard him share, and it's still ringing in our ears. Now we repeat his words to you. God is pure light. You will never even find a trace of darkness in him. If we claim that we share life with him but keep walking in the realm of darkness, we're fooling ourselves and not living the truth. But if we keep living in the pure light that surrounds him, we share unbroken fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, continually cleanses us from all sin. If we boast that we have no sin, we're only fooling ourselves, and we're strangers to the truth. But if we freely admit our sins when his light uncovers them, he will be faithful to forgive us every time. God is just to forgive our sins because of Christ, and he will continue to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. If we claim that we're not guilty of sin when God uncovers it with his light, we make him a liar, and his word is not in us. And so my message to us today is pretty simple. Let's be people who are quick to admit our faults, our failures, our guilt and sin. Just like we teach children, let's admit it. Whatever it is, just ask for forgiveness and we can move on. Let's not be ones who are diminishing the name of King Jesus because of our pride. Let's be ones who come clean quickly and run right back into his light. Well,
Beautiful.
how are you doing, Juan?
Well, actually, yesterday that exact scripture was on my mind, no shadow of darkness, and not even the tiniest sliver, the perfection of God himself. So it's, for us to be able to actually truly even contemplate it, perfection without any fault. How many people, they're almost judging God. Why doesn't God do this? Why doesn't God do that? Why has he allowed this or something else to happen?
Yeah.
And so they're going to put themselves in judgment of God. You'll see people that some tragedy of some type has occurred in their life or their family's life. And then they're questioning God's will, God's way. How much of it was something where we had some control and it was actually our authority that he gave us that we weren't exercising. But are you going to find fault with God?
Yeah.
And if you're starting there, you're already off base. So you kind of have to, do a reset. God knows exactly what's it needed, exactly what's the time. And questioning, why isn't God doing something soon enough, fast enough, somehow, you're already off base before you even got started. So we start with his perfection and look for it to be worked out in our life, our world, give him permission to move on our behalf in the world according to his will.
That's so well said.
Tools of it. We want to be tools in his hand, ready and available, and we want God's will. Christ himself, in the midst of his crucifixion, thy will be done.
Yeah.
Okay. So out there in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing full well what was going to happen and where he was going, all the way to Jerusalem, by the way, from the Mount of Transfiguration, every step of the way, knowing he was going to his crucifixion.
Yeah.
So God's will be done. Thy will be done.
Thy will be done. It's so interesting that you say that, because that's been something that I feel like the Lord has been talking to me about, that if there's something in my life that is not aligning with the truth of his word, like his promises, then he's not the problem.
Hey, God, I just want to let you know, you're not the problem here. I understand that. You're off the hook. I get it. And I'm just going to, you know what? You don't have to worry about it today. I'm not going to get mad at you. You're off the hook. You're not the problem.
Yeah. It's not him. It's me.
Oh, my God. Oh, I'm sure he feels better already.
Yeah, he does. He does. Well, I think he's having a great time right now. I feel like he's probably having a really great time right now, because it's an amazing time in history. There's so much that I wanted to get your perspective on.
Well, let
today.
me just add this for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just add this. It'll sound a bit over the top, I'm sure, but it is really, really true. I remember conversations, I mean, with really, people that were pretty deep, invested, involved politically and in the business world, when I was in my early teens, and listening intently to everything they were saying, what was going wrong, what world was going off track, and that there was no real hope to pull it in. And I remember one gentleman said, we won't get it fixed in our lifetime. It's going to be up to you to fix this, because it won't get done in my lifetime. And, that kind of stuck with me, because he was a real, for real player, and he saw all these problems and crises. And, here we are. And the reality is that we actually have a for real shot at going in and doing some serious damage to the deep state players, the ones that have been, really engineering the collapse of society. These narrow-spirited people that want to tear it all down, blow it all up, so they can rebuild it in their own image. These are the people that want this one world operation, and there are multiple clubs doing that. People think it is just maybe one group, and the reality is, whether you're talking the Davos crowd, the Mason crowd, the devil himself coming to, the whole earth is under one person, the 13 bloodline families. All of them have similar goals. Even if you look at the Georgia Guidestones, what that's about is only having 500 million people left, but it's their people, because they've destroyed the whole world down to 500 million, and then they can re-engineer it their way. One of the things that's not known very widely at all, we look at China. China in the last 2,000 years, 3 times has brought their population down by 90%.
That's so
where
sick.
People who were in control literally killed everybody that wasn't them, and then had to start back. Why? Because they wanted to purge out all the people that, from other bloodlines, etc., to get a pure land of just their people. And that's a pretty scary thought. That mindset still exists, and we are coming against that as Christians, as believers. Think of all the groups that, with the green movement and all that, we're destroying the earth. And so the earth, in the Georgia Guidestones, the carrying capacity of earth, according to them, is 500 million. Okay, so they're going to get it down to 500 million, then just hold right there to 500 million. The reality is that's not scriptural.
Right.
The scriptural perspective is go fill the earth. And I've heard even preachers say, well, the earth's full. Actually not. We're at about 8 billion. I remember somebody had done a very scientific study and said that the carrying capacity of the earth was 50 billion. But the reality with technology, it's not even about the earth itself. The Abrahamic covenant is that Abraham's children would be as the sand of the sea.
Yeah.
For number. Okay, we haven't even done one beach yet.
That's right.
And then we're just a beachhead in a divine perspective. But then also as the stars in the heaven, well, there's layers of understanding that. That's the physical and the spiritual. But I believe it also is that when we're growing out from where we are right now, that God intends us to go out and fill not just the earth, but the solar system around us, and beyond that, other systems beyond that we are to continue to grow, as far as our minds can even understand and accept. That's a physical promise, by the way.
So you think Elon is working toward fulfilling a biblical mandate by inhabiting Mars and saying that we need
mankind.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, even here in low Earth orbit, our sustaining capacity here, we have plenty of materials in the way that we can expand things out. You could literally have in the space just above the Earth hundreds and hundreds of billions, not millions, billions of people. And it wouldn't actually get that crowded because there's a lot of space out there before you even get to the moon and Mars and other places. So, and in fact, I've done quite a bit of work in the background in that kind of an area. And it is just a stunning thought when you think it out of what that might look like, how that might work. You might want to come home to the earth for a weekend vacation, but it would be too dirty. The air is too heavy with moisture compared to what your nice controlled environment is on your platform in space.
Huh. Well, on kind of a topic of the atmosphere, I have been wanting to hear your perspective on chemtrails and geoengineering for a while now. I think we were supposed to get into that the last time we had you on, but we just ran out of time. So if you wouldn't mind, because I think if I'm not mistaken, your perspective runs a little counter to a lot of people who are out there fighting against it.
Well, I want to qualify it a little bit. We don't want the dustification of the air. We don't want this material in the air. I mean, I don't want to breathe it. We don't.
Yeah.
None of us should be breathing it. It's not ideal in a perfect world. The other side of the coin is that there's a reason why the primary stuff that people are seeing sprayed there is aluminum oxide.
Yeah.
Ooh, aluminum oxide. I don't want anything aluminum. Okay, well, I get that. What is aluminum oxide? It's the same material that you use on the sandpaper, glue it to the sandpaper so you can sand your car, sand your house, sand the wood, whatever.
Okay.
It's beach sand. And so it's dust. If you get the right kind of storms in the desert, different parts of the world, it gets carried all over the world just off the desert sands. We get a lot of the dust from deserts and other parts of the world in the atmosphere, and it goes around the world a couple of times before it settles back down, just from huge dust storms. So it's not like we don't get exposed to this naturally from time to time. And in fact, I remember a very large lawsuit. It was a successful lawsuit. There was a particular company that had what they call a laydown lot for their containers from huge container ships. And one of the people that lived by this location where they had housing there in the area complained that the dust caused their lung cancer.
Wow.
And they went and looked at it. And I remember at first when I heard it, I thought, well, that's the silliest thing. And I happened to be in the area with somebody who was pointing this out that knew all about the suit. And we looked over, and it just happened to be a nice afternoon. And we looked over, and you could see this haze in that area over really a mile or two area.
Wow.
Around this large, hundreds of acres lot. There's rail lines with the railroad going through it, the ships coming in, unloading containers and everything. And even though most of it was paved, there's dust on everything. You could see the dust in the air. It was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And you're breathing that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just obviously probably the main dust. I figured, well, there's a lot of smoke, maybe from ships being there, from all the vehicles and everything else. And he pointed out, no, the vehicles that are running around now, this is after they lost the lawsuit. They went to electric vehicles to be pushing everything around, or propane vehicles, so that they weren't putting out diesel exhaust or gas exhaust and all that. And it still had that there. It's just from all the activity. So you can have environmental stuff that could easily be not good for you in a similar manner. And I think we all kind of have to be aware that that stuff is out there. But what they're doing, and there's some spraying that's ultimately very rare that is other materials. But the primary spraying that people are aware of and are looking at, understanding, is the stuff that's being sprayed up there at 44,000 feet. And you can tell the difference between a normal condensation trail or contrail from an aircraft from a spray trail by how long it lingers and how dispersed it gets. So when you have a normal condensation trail, I'm actually looking at a non-normal one this second. When you have a normal one, after about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, really almost tops, you'll notice that the trail's dissipated out and stays fairly narrow and dissipates behind the aircraft. And usually, if it's an honest one, in normal times, it's gone in 3-4 minutes for the most part. It's almost completely gone.
Yeah.
And what that is that that's moisture up at that altitude. The altitude where this is going on is up there, 44,000 feet. They're spraying this stuff out. Well, that moisture, it's in the air. It's very thin. The air is very thin up there. You can't just breathe it readily. It's so thin. If you tried to breathe, you'd suffocate that altitude. My wife just gave me a little water to keep my throat clear. Anyway, so about the height that you can go without any oxygen in small aircraft, we go up to 14,000 feet. We have to put the oxygen on if you're the pilot. And you can get up there around 20, and you'll be pretty lightheaded. And if you're there too long, you'll start to get a little punchy. Beyond that, it's only a few minutes, and you're not coherent. As you get up to 30 and like that, 44,000 feet, you're out. But because the aircraft is going so fast through the air, there's a pressure wave in front of the wing. It condenses the air. It's like pushing it all together, condenses it. And then after it's condensed, and it goes back into vacuum on the trailing edge of the wing and behind the aircraft, it's going back to vacuum. And so the little bit of moisture that's been pushed all together scatters back out, and in the sunlight, with a little bit of heat like that, and it goes back to vapor, just like steam, goes into the rest of the air. How far do you see the steam after it leaves a pot when you're boiling something? Just a short distance.
Yeah.
And then what moisture is suddenly condensed into a steam goes back into suspension air, disappears. So that's a condensation or contrail, and done naturally. And you can get a contrail down at lower altitudes. You'll see, like, you go watch any of the air performances of, say the Blue Angels, or the Thunderbirds. You'll see moisture condensing around the wingtips, and some of the actual performances they do are designed to hit the air in such a way that you'll see condensation coming off the wingtips, and it's a pretty cool effect. And the Coriolis vapor trail behind it. Doing something similar at lower altitudes. So you can do it at different altitudes. You can do it at great altitude and get a condensation trail. Now, with that in mind, there's also the spray project. So what's the purpose of spraying at these various altitudes? When and let me just give a little bit of the history before this. In the mid and late 70s, Russia was messing with America. We're in the middle of the Cold War. And they had figured out in the late 60s, early 70s, if they did certain things with broadcasting certain types of frequencies, radio frequencies, radar frequencies, all sorts of things, essentially energy, that they could push an energy wave up towards the jet stream. And the jet stream, it's like a river in the sky above us, where there's certain paths that the moisture follows. sometimes at very high speed. I remember doing a trip. I can't remember where it was from or to Hawaii. I think it was coming back from Hawaii, and we hit a jet stream that was unusual, and it was a very high speed jet stream. And so a trip that was supposed to take like 5 hours took like, I think it was like 3 hours and 50 minutes or something. And the pilot said that was the fastest trip he had ever done on that route.
Wow.
And it was because of this extremely rapid jet stream that was pushing us along. The other side of the coin would have been if you were going against it, you'd have used massive fuel and would have taken quite a bit longer, because the plane only knows its speed through the air, not what its speed is to the ground. The airframe is, pushing against a river of water, like going upstream in a river. And it's like when I have the boat out, if I have the luxury of time, I'll go with the tide. And so, if I'm in an inland waterway or something, if the tide is coming in, well, you got 6 hours of the tide coming in. If I'm going out, I'm going against the jet stream the whole way, the current, and I'm going to use a bunch more fuel, because sometimes that speed is 3-4 knots.
Yeah.
If I or higher. If I pick the time of day, so I'm going with the tide going in, consumption goes down rapidly. When you're talking, 20 gallons an hour of fuel, and it's costing you $5 a gallon. If you cut that consumption down by 25%, that's a significant savings.
Yeah.
So picking the time of day so you can go with the stream is a great idea. So then there's currents of airflow up at altitude moving across the face of the earth. In the U.S., the airflow west to east, and so it's coming off the Pacific Ocean, going all the way across to the Atlantic Ocean. What was going on with Russia in the late 60s, early 70s was they were sending out a broadcasting energy at a frequency that was pushing the jet stream, which is made up of moisture. This moist area of the atmosphere up high, 35,000 feet up, 40,000 feet up, pushing it further south from these huge radar arrays up at the northern edge of the Soviet Union that were looking for our bombers coming over up at what we call the dew line, which is an area where we're detecting and looking for Russian aircraft coming to America, on a bombing run, during the Cold War or something. And so if you think about it, they're far away from the United States, even though at the closest up there we're only like, less than 10 miles apart from the Russian border, from the U.S. border up in Alaska. Still, what was going on is that these huge radar arrays were hitting the jet stream very early in its flow around the Earth and deflecting it. And so, like deflecting an arrow right as it leaves the bow, if you only deflect it a millimeter or two, by the time it hits the target 50, 60 yards away, it could be off by a couple feet.
Mm-hmm.
So as the jet stream is flowing across up there at the Arctic region, they were pushing it and deflecting it way off course with this radio frequency, pushing it what we call a standing wave. And so it would be like if I'm shooting water out of a hose and I take another hose beside it and turn it on the water coming out of the hose, it's dense, and I could push that water stream out. I could do it with just air.
Yeah.
If I had, fast enough, dense enough moving air to deflect it and make it go off, kilter. That's exactly what they were doing. And what the problem was, it's not just in 2 dimensions. When they were pushing that Arctic stream off course, they were also moving it in altitude. And so you have super cold air. It says at 44,000 feet where they're doing the spraying, it's about 65 to 68 degrees average, most anywhere in the world that you go. So it's very cold. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And, you're now, 90 degrees difference. And so it's very, 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 very cold. When one of the aircraft had a failure on a small aircraft of a valve that was there to release pressure in the aircraft, a very famous golfer, the flight crew in the small jet, it caused very cold air to come into the jet almost instantaneously while depressurizing. And it was said that they had about 15 seconds to have reacted, or they would already begin to have been being frozen.
Wow.
And so this aircraft, they froze inside the aircraft within just a few, probably under a minute, were extremely cold, and their consciousness plus depressurizing. The combination, the depressurization at altitude that happened that fast, they only had a few seconds of consciousness, but then the freezing, was so relatively quick that they just didn't have much of a hope. And, within just a minute or two, they were frozen solid like block ice, and the people in the back of the aircraft too. And that one crashed out in the Midwest. When I finally ran out of fuel, we sent an aircraft up to look at it, see what was going on, but they knew pretty much what had occurred when they got close to it. And so what the Russians were doing was pushing that super chill air not only south from further north on the globe, but also down to lower altitudes.
Do you think I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you think that's where they got the idea for global cooling back in what was that about the same time they started talking about global cooling?
Well, that's an interesting thought. I'd never thought about it exactly that way, but yes, they in the 60s, and they spent a lot of time and money trying to push the idea that the world was cooling, and so you can go back and look at Time and Newsweek and all the insider stuff, and including you can look at the Economist, the Rothschilds publication, and CFR papers and reports, Council on Foreign Relations, and all these different ones. And they're all talking about the fact that with global cooling, the world's going to go back into an ice age. Yeah. And that was when the first talk about nuclear weapons causing global cooling, putting dust in the air and then blocking out sunlight, cooling the earth. And that was the big threat to the planet. We're going to, get bombed back to the ice age. And they were talking Stone Age in those days. It was going to be ice age. And so I don't know that I ever tied that specifically with what the Russians were doing. And in fact, I would doubt it, because almost nobody, even coming up on the Reagan administration, I don't think anybody publicly really latched onto it until we got to SDI. And during the SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative period, we then talked about the questions, are the Russians messing with our weather?
Okay.
And that was done intentionally so that people understood what the threat was. But nobody ever was really there was a few papers that were published on it, but for the most part, we weren't really pushing it politically or publicly that hard. It was very, we're in the middle of the Cold War. It was done speculatively. We were more concerned with the particle beam weapons and the tests that were being done, being able to propel something the size smaller than a grain of sand. The weight of the powder in the talcum powder jar, even lighter than smaller than that, but move it at the speed of light, just under the speed of light, like a laser effect, but it's little particles, little bullets being fired that could literally pass through the skin of a spacecraft like it was butter. Wow. And knock out all the electronics, destroy a space vehicle that way. The particle beam testing that Russia was doing up on the north side of the Caspian Sea, north of Iran, was actually outstanding work, and they were way ahead of us on particle beam weapons. But they were doing particle beam, we were looking at light weapons, and so we had determined by that point in time that we could do more with light and be just as effective or more effective than we could with particulates. And by doing it in the light spectrum, we would have more effect down at the surface, also in the atmosphere. So with energy weapons, which are now very common. So, but the super short thing, I know I'm kind of plodding along, but if you don't have these details, you can't understand this discussion. So sure. For those that are following, I'm just trying to give you enough material so you can make an honest understanding or equation of what all I'm putting out there. In the stuff that the Russians were doing, as you got further into the 70s, it became much more serious because they were destroying winter crops, winter wheat that needs snow for cover and certain temperatures. We had winter wheat crops failing. We had oranges in Florida and California, orange groves that had been around for 100 years that were frozen and killed by these late freezes, and was messing with our economy even. And you go after the bread basket with wheat and orange juice and things like that, and they were getting better and better at it. It was becoming a much more serious threat, where it could do things more seasonally. And as they got better at moving the jet stream and leveraging the position of the jet stream, both by latitude, pushing it south from Canada down into Florida, causing bigger storms. And as they got better at moving the moisture, the threat was that you could really begin to cause turmoil in America in the weather spectrum that would kill huge numbers of people and destroy the economy. So coming into the Reagan administration, and President Reagan was briefed by the intelligence agency people about these concerns and what we've detected, where they're at. That's when Reagan's coming out calling them the evil empire and all sorts of things. But they have become a very real threat to not just America, but the rest of the world, because if they could work, for example, even with China, or if other countries came up with these technologies, it could be very serious. We had a guy that was doing a lower tech version of this out over Minnesota that had figured out how he could take huge home type antennas used for television reception and electrify them in a certain way, and he put them out in a grid around his house. And then he had about 100 car batteries, and he was putting out a direct current standing wave. And he could change the orientation of these antennas and and he was able to create a little spot over his little farm, which was only like 5 acres, where he could make it rain when there's no other rain in the rest of the area.
Wow.
He could send a standing wave out in a certain way, and you'd end up with clouds over his house, you know, in that few mile area.
Yeah.
And then the other way around is it could be cloudy, rainy, everything else, and he could create a spot where there wasn't the rain coming down, like throwing a rock in the stream or moving a rock in the stream, because of course the air has got a particular path of travel. He'd aim these antennas at or away from his house and deflect that moisture coming in. So imagine that he was able to affect the weather in his local little location with car batteries and TV antennas.
Wow.
Quite a few, but he had figured it out.
Yeah.
And so he got a visit, and he got a little bit of an explanation, and he had to stop that. But what led to it wasn't just what was going on with him. He'd shown other people this simple technology.
Wow.
And so he was building them for other people. And there was people down on the coast of Florida and north of there who had put these in and were, in the opinion of the scientists involved, deflecting hurricanes from hitting the coast right at their location.
Wow.
Well, the problem is that sounds fantastic, but when you keep a hurricane off the coast, it continues to develop energy oftentimes. And so when it first became a thing to go deal with this problem, it was right after there was a huge storm that hit up at Virginia Beach. And in reassessing this, I remember at the time, the guys that looked at it in the months afterwards said, no, that was that bad because that particular person had done what he had done, or that group of people. And I think if I recall, there was about a dozen people that had, and our guys on the ground had no idea how that happened at the time. It was just a shock. When somebody figured out there was a person and talked to them in Central Florida, and they were all communicating with other people, and they all said, well, this is the guy here in Michigan that had the tech, and they paid him a visit. Everything got dismantled, and nobody ever did that again.
Is this scalar technology?
No, this stuff there wouldn't pass into the scalar. Scalar's actually much more complex and advanced. These were just simple standing waves.
Okay.
But it's a good question. So then we know that we can affect weather. We know we can affect it in huge areas. The Russians had proven that. In fact, in that window, if you go back and look at the records, I think it was 79, but I'd have to look and see. We had the highest snowfall ever recorded anywhere on planet Earth.
Wow.
At Mount Rainier up in Washington. And it was like I think it was 1,100 inches or just shy of that of snowfall. And it was directly related to this activity by Russia, the Soviet Union specifically in those days, to manage weather control against the United States. And so as the Reagan administration came into office, they screamed bloody murder behind the scenes, and we're not going to let you get away with this, and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, oh, we're so innocent. We have to be able to detect your bombers, and this is our technology to watch for you coming after us with your bombers. So, stick it where the sun don't shine. Reagan had asked behind the scenes for a response, a way to defend against it. And then a couple of years into his administration, Edward Teller famously had briefed Reagan. And then we were going after the Soviet Union in multiple ways. We started with running oil prices down to the ground so they couldn't sell their oil or gas and break their economy by stopping Western money from coming in to support their economy. We did it with the moral challenges with the Pope and everybody, in a religious realm, the severe treatment of Pentecostals and Jews in Russia, and we went after Russia for the way they treated their own population. The moral basis for whether or not they should be able to operate as a country over their people, because they were not of the people, by the people, for the people type thing.
Okay.
We went after them because they had wars going on in Afghanistan and in Central America, and so we've sifted in defensive materials for the people in those locations to help them fight back. But we did the economic stuff. But a little bit later, after Reykjavik, when Gorbachev backed out of a missile deal, a nuclear treaty on intermediate range missiles. But we also went after them with SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, and the goal at the time was to come up with a version of what now we call an Iron Dome over Israel, things like that, where we could take out missiles as they were in the launch phase, leaving the Earth, going up to space, flying across the world, and then coming down and re-entering into the U.S., if you will. And so we wanted to go after the missiles in 3 separate zones: launch, and then coast. So they use all their fuel up to get up to altitude, get up to 15,000 miles an hour, race across over the Earth, and then when they're coasting after the fuel's run out, going across the Earth, that's the coast phase. And then as they would re-enter in these intercontinental ballistic missiles, the descent phase, and where they could merge into multiple smaller missiles. They break up into 8, 10, 20 pieces, whatever, and come down as multiple missiles going for different targets.
And the SDI one is using particulates to do that?
No, particle beam weapons was something that the Soviets were getting pretty good at. We had decided that we wouldn't do that because, while we did tests like that, essentially what they were doing was accelerating these particles up to, hopefully near the speed of light or very, very fast. They never got anywhere close to that. They didn't get to, 10th of the speed of light, but they're moving perceptively to most people. They're moving so fast, hundreds of thousands of miles an hour. And speed of light's 186,000 miles per second. So it goes around the Earth about 7 times in a second. That's how fast light moves. 25,000 miles around the Earth, 7.5 seconds. 7.5 times around the Earth in 1 second at the equator. So the deal is that, and they weren't even a fraction of that. The deal is though that those particles would move at a very high speed, and when they hit something, even though they're light, small, they're moving so fast, it has so much kinetic energy. I can give you an idea. If you throw a baseball at 100 miles an hour, let's say it contains 1x of energy, so much energy of that. If I throw it 200 miles an hour, does it contain 2x? No. It takes 4 times the energy to double the speed, essentially. So it would, it becomes huge very fast to go much, 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 much faster. You have to have way more power, if you will.
Okay.
As you accelerate something, forget doing it with a baseball, think of a grain of sand. And it's one thing to fire it out of a gun at, a certain speed, say a bullet, but as you get to doubling that on the speed, the amount of energy that you have to project it at extreme high speed is surprised like a small nuclear explosion. And so doing that with particles is really difficult. Doing it with light is different, and so that's why we have these directed energy weapons.
And that's the technology behind the Strategic Defense Initiative, is the light weapons?
It is. Well, the Strategic Defense Initiative was multiple things. So we challenged Russia on all different types of technology. Missile technology, for example, part of the outcome of SDI, if because Reagan was going to give it to everybody, was the whole idea to defend themselves anywhere they were at against intercontinental ballistic missiles. And when we get through talking about contrails or condensation trails or materials that they're putting out there, it'll be clearer. But if you put something like that out, how do you then go attack the other guys if you made it possible for everybody to defend against the intercontinental ballistic missiles? Well, that's why because of things that we got very good at in space, where these missiles are in the coast phase, where we could take out missiles coming across the planet like that and descending, we went to what's called hypersonic missiles. So instead of going out to space, and it's like a bullet, after the bullet leaves the gun and it's headed to the target, if you move the gun, does it change the path of the bullet? No. Once it's left the barrel, it's just dumb. It's like an arrow in flight.
Yeah.
It's on its way till it hits the target. And so these intercontinental ballistic missiles, you fire them up, they use all their fuel, and they're in the coast phase until they come to the target. And the only thing that changes is that as it's descending down into the atmosphere, we would MIRV, multiple independent vehicles or warheads, and each of these little bomblets would go towards different cities, and they would have a little bit of fuel juice to change their trajectory, to move from the line that they were on to go to a different line. So like have a little bit of rocket fuel. They would, one would head to Sacramento and the other one would head to LA. Well, as they're coming down into the atmosphere, they're, hundreds of miles from their target. So a little bit of a burn of fuel changed their orientation, kind of a kick. And now they're headed to a whole different location than what the missile was headed for before. And so, but just a little bit of fuel at that time as they're descending into the atmosphere. The defense against these space-based weapons technologies was decided to be slower technology, but still very fast, what we call hypersonic. Instead of going out into space where there's not atmosphere, it's, a near vacuum, etc., you'd move closer to the Earth into the high upper atmosphere. And, be up there anywhere from 60,000 feet, which is very, very low, 4 miles higher than most airliners travel, down in the 40,000 and below, 38, 35,000. Few private jets fly up there, 45. But with vehicles that travel very fast, most of the vehicles that we're talking about are running up there 90 to 120,000 feet, and they're what we call hypersonic. So they can move anywhere from, on the low side, about 5,000 to 6,000 miles an hour, which is very fast.
Yeah.
Mach 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. As you get further higher in the air, it gets thinner and thinner. They can go a little bit faster. But, as they're moving, the atmosphere, they're going through it so fast, the nose cone just glows red, turns white. Any metals just start to melt. And it's very hard to steer. The tiniest little nudge, as you get sideways to the direction of flow, all the control surfaces have to heat up tremendously. So you can't turn it fast. It takes a long, very slow turn. Otherwise, you get other materials that are sensitive, and you'll just burn the aircraft up. So we have hypersonic missiles. The Russians have them. The Chinese have them. Iran's got them now. That can move extremely fast at, reasonably high altitudes, 80, 90, 100,000 feet.
Wow.
And so fast that you can't shoot them down with a bullet. They're going, 10 times the speed of a bullet from a high-powered gun, rifle. Okay, so the aircraft that you would send up, they can't even put, bullets on them that'll do it. And even a missile off the aircraft has to catch up, find that location, intercept it. It's like a bullet trying to hit a bullet. The timing is so critical, and you can't change the speeds too readily. So trying to intercept something that's moving at hypersonic speeds is extremely difficult. And if you're trying to catch up to it, if it's going, just for the sake of example, if it's going only relatively slow at Mach 6, that's faster than any of our fighter aircraft go. Most of them can go about Mach 2 to Mach 2.5. We got a few of them that can go faster now, but they can't go very far on that speed. As you move further up into these unmanned vehicles, and they've got these higher speeds, the problem is if you're, say, moving at Mach 6 and they're up there moving at Mach 8 or 10, you can't catch up to them.
Yeah.
If you get up there before they get there, you have to get close to them, intercept them, and then hit them or explode in extremely close proximity before them. So they have to fly into a debris trail or something like that. But the other problem is this. As you get these hypersonic missiles, they're under power all the way to the target. They're literally under power. Remember I said that the intercontinental ballistic missiles, they use their fuel up and then they coast across the edge of space and then come back down into the target, coasting in. If they break up into other ones, they got a little bit of fuel for the these little pieces to change trajectories and then head to their independent targets, but it's not much fuel because they're just changing their orientation, getting a bump, and then they're just coasting the target beyond that. And by the way, they're decelerating all the way because they're in the atmosphere and they're getting slower and slower and slower. So by the time they get down near the ground, they're only moving, 1,000 or 1,500 miles an hour, even less in some cases if they're going all the way down the surface. So now, if you come back to a hypersonic missile, it's very hard to catch and defeat it. You're in the edge of the atmosphere, and so it can fly. If you're out in space and you have a tail and wing surfaces, they don't mean anything because there's no air up there of any significance. Extremely, just a few molecules hanging out there. Even at super high speed, you can't really do anything. It's not going to change the direction. As you get lower and lower and lower, just think of you're coming through fluid. The atmosphere is just a vapor fluid. As you get to the ocean, it's a liquid fluid. If you have a rudder on a boat or the engine on your boat, you turn it sideways one way or the other, it turns very hard in that dense water. When you're moving super, super fast, up there at Mach 8, 10, 12 in the lower atmosphere, you can steer by using, control surfaces. And then it's still being propelled, pushed through the air with some type of propulsion, all the way to wherever you're going to go hit. And so now you have the ability to steer. Well, if I try to hit it with a particle beam, two problems. It's got to go through the atmosphere. And that particle you're firing that's great out in space in the atmosphere just burns up.
Okay.
And because it's hitting interference, it heats up and it melts and it's gone and it stops doing it. Out in space, the particle, could go from the Earth to the moon and not hit anything and be relatively intact. You get down the atmosphere, you fire it, and it's going through that relatively dense material. It just melts. So a particle beam is great in space, lousy in the atmosphere. If you have a laser weapon, you can work in the atmosphere more effectively. And a light weapon, think of a kid with a magnifying glass, and you get the point just right on it from the sun, and you can burn up ants, right?
Yeah.
That's a simple explanation because you have different types of light, energy, the way that it's carried and refracted, etc. So there's a lot goes into this. It's not simple, but you can do it, and it's moving 7.5 times around the Earth a second. You hit a target, something moving at Mach 10 or Mach 12, it's like it's barely moving. It's just barely moving in the time it takes for that light to reach it. And it's like it's in slow motion. So it's easy to hit a chemically powered vehicle with something that is, moving at the speed of light. Very easy to hit those targets, relatively. You have technology, you can anticipate where it's at, and hit it, within a few inches of where it's trying to hit all the time, even with refraction through the atmosphere. Refraction is kind of reflection. You have moisture in the air like that. So when you try to use a laser weapon, especially from the surface of the Earth, where the air is denser, it kind of refracts or bends. And so you have to anticipate where a target's going to be. Okay. And you'll be a little bit more scattered, but, they have computers that work this stuff. In fact, instead of trying to just hit one tiny spot, they take a whole field of them and focus them just like a magnifying glass on one tiny spot. And you have a little bit of energy from all of them that are getting within that zone fairly coherently. So, because if you think of the kid with the magnifying glass, it'll be hot as you get closer and closer and closer to that one spot, and you have to hold the magnifying glass closer or further away to get to that pinpoint, depending on the curve of the glass. And so that's essentially a very simplistic way of describing how these energy weapons work that, the average person, I hope, can kind of get their mind into a little bit. So having the ability to have these high-speed missiles that work right in the atmosphere, can be steered to the target. That was the answer to SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative. And if somebody was trying to shoot you down, you could steer around where they were at, and it'd be very hard to get them because you have the ability to steer. With hypersonic missiles, you can't anticipate where I'm going to be because I'm going to turn just slightly. I'm going to go lower. I'm going to go higher. And while you're trying to get your little dot in the magnifying glass right on me, I can fly right around it. And very hard to track and hit at those speeds. When you're in the hypersonic zone, you're traveling at miles a second. Okay, not just a mile a minute. You can get into a zone where you're traveling at extremely high speed. Okay. And so it's hard to hit a bullet faster than a bullet. So then what SDI was, as we came into the Reagan administration, what that was all about was that we were coming up with ways to anticipate where these missiles were going to be that were coming intercontinental, to make it so they couldn't shoot us down, or so we could shoot them down, or vice versa. Hypersonic was developed to help defeat some of the Strategic Defense Initiative systems. But in this whole zone, the final phase, the most critical stage for defending against incoming missiles, was in the upper atmosphere down to the earth. And upper in this case was up there, 35,000 feet. And that's the final phase as missiles would be coming in towards the earth. And so you got, depending on where they would want to detonate, usually above ground, you got about 5 miles to target. If it's coming straight down, they're generally coming in at an angle, so you might have 6, 7, 8 miles from that area up where airplanes fly in the 30 to 33,000 foot range, commonly, till it would be in an area where it would explode and destroy a city or facility, etc. So the final phase of SDI was we sprayed talcum powder type weight material, 25 microns, very, very tiny. It's even finer than what you see in talcum powder technically. Very, very tiny dust up into the atmosphere, and in a very specific spot. We wanted the dust to sit in that zone where ozone is made. And that's where you really start seeing the moisture that we see as the clouds like that, for the most part, beginning to condense. And when the sunlight's coming in from the sun, it is radiant energy. It's this solar energy. And as it hits water droplets, it breaks them up into an ozone gas, and they very quickly repropagate in just a second or so or less. But for an instant, that ozone gas becomes very reflective, and it reflects out some of the wavelengths of sunlight that would cause you cancer. So the ozone is a protective layer all across the earth, the membrane, to protect us from the direct energy from the sun. When the sun's straight overhead at high noon, that is just a very thin layer of protection. That's why, we tell people, be careful being out in the sun too much. That's solar energy, and it can damage cells, which can then become cancerous because they're damaged. As the sun moves, is before high noon or after high noon, at this apex, the angle of attack, it deflects or reflects out some of these more damaging rays, and they just go right back out to space harmlessly. So as you get past high noon, the amount of damaging radiation from the sun goes down pretty dramatically, and it's reflected out in this ozone layer area where the sunlight is creating this ozone or protective reflective area. It's not just that it's reflecting, it also is absorbing that energy, turning it into the gas, and kind of catching it like a pillow, so that it's in converting that energy signal into the splitting the molecules into the gas like that. So what the reason for all that conversation is this: when they're spraying dust, talcum powder type dust, the sandpaper reflective aluminum oxide material, which is, sand from the seashore type of stuff. They're spraying it at 44,000 feet, which is kind of the altitude limit for those aircraft that are doing the spraying. And they want them up there as high as they can get them as they're spraying, and above where most of the airliners are at, by the way. And then as the material comes out, what are they using that's not being sprayed in water? If it was sprayed in water, the water had turned to ice the second it came out of the airplane. You'd have the nozzle spraying it that would be frozen up with ice, and you wouldn't be able to get any more of the spray out.
Okay.
So they have to use something that has an antifreeze capability that won't freeze at those temperatures. Well, it just so happens that jet fuel, kerosene, with the various stabilizers in it that they have, which are, kind of some nasty stuff.
Yeah.
But they're not huge percentages. The kerosene that we use for jet fuel with some additives is antifreeze. It has an antifreeze type thing. All of the fuel sitting in the tanks in the airplane at these super cold temperatures, it doesn't turn to an ice cube.
Okay.
We can spray it out with this sand-like material suspended in it in a slurry, and it goes out of the aircraft. What happens with the jet fuel? Well, you're in a very low vacuum area. There's not a lot of air up there at 44,000 feet. Very, very, very thin. So the liquid fuel going out as a mist with the particulates, the talcum powder sized grains of sand, if you will, very quickly the kerosene dissipates. It goes into a vapor state, and the sand-like particles are carried for a little distance in these droplets as it's dispersed, and then the sunlight breaks down those droplets, and the kerosene goes into total vapor and dissipates away, leaving just those little pieces of sand-like dust at these altitudes. Now, that whole process, they're at 44,000 feet, it goes out as kind of a mist or a stream, and it falls pretty quickly down through altitude-wise. So you can picture 44,000 feet, you're about 8.5 miles up, and 8 miles up. And it's going to fall down to where the atmosphere gets heavier and thicker, and down into that ozone area where the moisture is thicker, and you're creating ozone because there's water vapor there that's starting to get very dense. As these particles fall down, it's like landing on a feather bed. And they fall out of the air, the kerosene dissipates away and goes, which, by the way, you're already getting kerosene anyway because all the aircraft are up there. The sunlight breaks it down, it becomes essentially relatively harmless, really. But it's the additives that they add to the jet fuel to help stabilize it, do different things. Some of those are actually pretty nasty, and you wouldn't want to have them all over your hands or skin and things like that. It could be very cancerous, but the amount of that material is ultimately fairly thin, and as the sunlight is hitting it, the sunlight itself is neutralizing it and taking away a lot of the properties where it just becomes like a salt. And so now you have this dust that is away from the droplets of the kerosene that has further vaporized and gone away. Okay. And it hits that upper atmosphere up there, 6 miles up, 35,000 feet. It's still falling because, it's got weight to it, but it's very, very lightweight, and it's in the jet stream now where the moisture is at. And that jet stream is moving anywhere from yesterday when we flew back from Africa, I watched the jet stream change. In one area, we had a jet stream that we were going against, and it was 80 miles an hour. In another area, the jet stream went down to almost zero. And then as we came across the United States, we had a headwind of 28 miles an hour for most of the trip where I happened to look at it, coming from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. And so it was a pretty steady 28 to 32 miles an hour of headwind at the angle that we were at. Well, if you're a piece of dust, like a piece of sand, only lighter, essentially a feather in the wind, and the jet stream is moving at 30 miles an hour. Think of a car moving at 30 miles an hour, going from west to east. You're getting carried along with it. You're not as much falling out of the atmosphere at that point. You're being pushed like a kite.
Yep.
And so all of those little pieces of material are flying across above the country like little teeny kites. And they're getting hit with the sun's energy during the daytime and heating up. And they'll actually float a little bit higher. And they're moving with the stream. So even though it doesn't sound like much speed, and end up in the jet stream, you can get up, into, 100 plus miles an hour, or even higher at different altitudes. Down at those levels, generally, somewhere, 30, 40, 50, 80 miles an hour. Like when we send up weather balloons, we launch them out towards the West Coast. And they go up and they go to 80, 90, 100,000, 110,000 feet. And they're moving across the whole entire country. Remember the Chinese had those weather balloons that were coming into the U.S.? Well, they'd come all the way from China. They're up in the jet stream. The jet stream, they're like a sail in the jet stream. And the jet stream is pushing them across the country. They're not getting pushed with fuel. If you're a weather balloon, part of our problem with China was with those balloons. They were powered. They claimed they weren't. They were using hydrogen gas that was in the balloons, which is very light.
Well, if people could see them, they surely weren't in the jet stream anymore. Is that fair to say?
Nope, that's not true. They were up there at high altitudes when they were launched from China. They were up there at 80, 90,000 feet in a high altitude jet stream. When they got to the U.S., what the purpose of those weather balloons is that they had engines that worked on hydrogen. The balloons were filled with hydrogen, which is very lightweight. It's the lightest weight material. Helium has two electrons and hydrogen has one, so it's much lighter. And they were using that as a fuel, and they could make course adjustments with it. And so miraculously, they went right over various military bases. But what they did was to defeat something that we have going with all of that material we sprayed. Think of all these planes, they're spraying it out at 44,000 feet. The kerosene essentially goes to vapor. It's no longer in a liquid form. The particle is left falling through the air. It continues to fall till it hits this feather bed pillow, kind of an area of thicker atmosphere up there on 35, 34, 33,000 feet. So it's fallen about 2 miles, roughly. A little less than that, but just for sake of discussion, it's fallen 2 miles. And now it hits this denser air, and it starts getting buffeted. It's already kind of moving with whatever direction the jet stream is going, but now it's hit thicker air. And so instead of falling through that layer all the way down to the ground below, it's kind of skipping along in that area about 6 miles up. And by the way, when people tell you they're having a horrible day, it's horrible because the spraying is happening and those planes are getting stuff on me, and they're just, we're sickener than a dog. Anything you see sprayed, it's not coming down to the surface where you're at in a perfect world for days. It's all the way in Europe or back in Russia or something like that, or come back around the second path around when it got to you. It's been around the world a couple of times even. That's not reaching the surface instantaneously, not even a small fraction of it.
Okay.
So if you see it, you didn't get hit by it. So with that material up there, it gets into that buffeted area. Now, the interesting thing about material particles is they can store energy literally almost like a little battery. And it's kinetic, it's heat, it's other things, but it's a particulate there. So now I can hit it with an energy device and heat it up, give it, either sorts of things. What we have on the Earth, and people were aware of this from, a couple of books, Angels Don't Play This Harp, which Nick Begich did up there in Alaska, referring to the HARP, it's with AA, High Altitude Atmospheric Research Project. What they could do from the ground, and this is an SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, popularly named, system, is from the ground in these huge arrays of diodes, whole fields of them, like a football field and bigger. They can send up a little teeny bit of energy from thousands and thousands of these little energy generators, if you will, or they're not generators, but transmitters. And what they would do, just like the magnifying glass, is they could be focused so that all of that little bit of energy arrives at the same spot at the same time, wherever it's at. It's not just distance away, it's altitude. And so they could send a energy wave at the speed of light, technically just air under it, but they can send it, and hit a very small place, and they would heat up an area at high altitude, way above the Earth. Technically could be, 40, 50 miles above the Earth. One little teeny spot, and create an area of high heat where there's very thin particulates. And then they would send a different wave at a different frequency, hit that spot like a reflective mirror, and bounce energy off of it, and hit other places, way across the Earth. So it was like a reflection, a point of reflection or refraction. And so they could send something up, say up there out east of Anchorage, where the site that most people knew about was at, and they could hit Los Angeles. They could hit a place out over the ocean. They could bounce this thing off this high altitude location back to Whidbey Island up in Washington State, and or they could also hit these particles of dust that I just mentioned to you in that 6 miles up zone, and heat them up. And when you heat them up, they're jiggling really fast. Feynman used to like to use that term, jiggling. He was a very famous scientist, kind of an Einstein type guy. And when you get those particles to heat up really, really hot in a short period of time, they jiggle around, create a little bit of a bubble. And there's different things you can do. It's not just one effect, there's multiple effects. But if you knew there was an incoming missile and a very intercontinental ballistic missile was coming into the atmosphere at a certain location to hit, say, Seattle,
Okay.
then you could heat up the spot where that missile is going to be in, 30 seconds and do it at the speed of light. And when the missile goes through that exact little spot, the particles that you've put there are jiggling so fast that they act like a semi-solid. And when the missile goes through that area, suddenly it's like hitting water with your hand. You go from the air and you hit that surface where it's real dense with water, and you might have moved your hand 5 feet, swinging around above your head and all the way down, and then slap the water. When you hit that water, your hand goes from 50 miles an hour to 0 in about 2 inches, right? When you put those particles out there and the missile's coming in, it makes it act much denser, has higher energy, it's moving around a lot. And as the missile hits it, it's like hitting the surface of the water. It'll just break up the missile and destroy it. It will cause super high heat, energy transfer to the missile's warhead, and it can't survive that. And you're 6 miles up.
So is this the Iron Dome? Is this the Iron Dome technology? Is that how it works?
Well, I think it's within that zone, but it's not what the Iron Dome is.
Okay.
The Iron Dome is, as Israel uses it, is actually firing a bullet at a bullet. It's firing a missile at a missile and trying to hit it or get very close to it and then exploding just in front of it. So it has to go through debris. And so the technology to hit a missile with another missile is complex, but that's what the Iron Dome is. This is a different type of a dome in the sense that we're creating in an instant a area in the atmosphere that a missile would get to, and then it suddenly everything was going smooth. It's all right, no problem. You hit this super concentrated area of high energy, and it destroys the missile. That's with the dumb missile. What we and the Russians and China and Iran now have all done is gone to hypersonic missiles. And so they can be steered. Well, remember, it takes a few seconds of this energy being sent from a field of diodes up to a heated area in the upper atmosphere and then reflected back down to that exact spot to heat those particles up to create that defensive location.
Okay.
And I can move it very fast. Just think of holding a mirror in your hand. If you hold a mirror in your hand, you're reflecting off the sun. I can reflect that sun's light off of a mirror, and I can move from one spot to another spot that could be dozens of feet away, even miles away, in a fraction of a second, right? Well, that's all you're doing here is you're moving energy around. If I know where the missile's coming in, I can put that hot spot right where I want it to have that missile hit it. But when you're talking about something that can change direction multiple times a minute, moving at hypersonic speed, relatively slower, but steerable, it's very hard to create those hot spots. And the problem for us also is the hypersonic missile is up out of the thicker atmosphere. Remember, we're down at 6 miles. Those hypersonic missiles are up there at 20 miles, okay? 15, 18 miles. There's not much atmosphere there. There's nothing to heat up. There's no particulates because I'm not spraying them out of aircraft. So what was done during the SDI project worked for intercontinental ballistic missiles, but it's not near as good with the latest technology. So it's becoming obsolete in many ways.
Okay.
Although the Russians still have huge numbers of intercontinental ballistic missiles. So does China. So until their intercontinental ballistic missiles are gone, this is still a relevant technology. The other thing, though, that's going on that most people continue to have forgotten about, the ability to control the weather is still a very big deal.
Yeah.
And so about 25 years ago, we basically had weather control almost completely figured out, to where we could, with precision, change weather patterns, cause weather anomalies, etc., with impunity, without any problem, anywhere we wanted to do it across the continental U.S. and to a large extent, most anywhere in the world we wanted to do it. The problem is there's a lot of different ways of controlling the weather. And as I said, you can do things like throwing a rock in a stream, and then the weather has to go around that rock in the stream. There's a lot of little things you can do with the weather, and then a big portion of that goes back to these dust particles that you have in the air. Raindrops form around particles of dust, and those particles of dust can be electrified. Anywhere that the U.S. military operates, like you had guys in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we didn't want to take a chance on surface-to-air missiles being able to track an aircraft and fire a missile using, red eye, which is just looking for a heat source, or other types of missiles that are more complex to track our aircraft. We would spray dust in the air the same way, but at lower altitudes.
Okay.
Because we didn't care. It was only for a few hours. And we'd be spraying where our bombers or fighters might be working, so that the people on the ground couldn't hit them. And we could energize that material we sprayed into those areas in such a way that the simple red-eye technology tracking a heat source, we could fool it and make it look like the aircraft was someplace else. And so we'd spray these materials into an active area. And of course, you got wind and like that. So it might not be sprayed right where the action was at. They might spray it 50 or 100 miles upwind, knowing it'd be right where we wanted it when our aircraft went to go work in a certain area. And with the, atmospheric wind that's moving 20 or 30 miles an hour or more, I could be 20 miles away, spray it an hour before we were going to need it, and it'd be right where I wanted it on time, very predictable. And they just go back and forth, putting down a layer of this material to be in that area. And so that's kind of a common thing, and at much lower altitudes.
So what?
And that material sprayed at lower altitudes, by the way, falls out of the atmosphere within, just 100 miles, 200 miles. So it doesn't go around the Earth in the same way generally. So anyway, go ahead.
No, so there's so much more to this than I could have even fathomed. And, whenever you think about chemtrails and you kind of start digging into it in the way that a lot of people have, the ultimate conclusion is apparently they're trying to poison us and kill us. This is a very different perspective, and it's a very complex series of systems, it seems like, that they're using. A couple of things come to mind. One is after the 2020 election, when there were all of those military planes flying, patrolling the U.S., just like a tremendous
the drones.
Okay. Yeah. Was that in part something to do with what you've been describing, or was that just a level of readiness because things were getting pretty tense?
Completely different.
Okay.
No, completely different. Let me just add one thing. So our military isn't out to kill the American people. And the pilots in those aircraft are not out to kill the American people and grandma and their brothers and friends and wives and babies. There's been excellent security on those people involved in those types of operations. You haven't had people coming out talking about, I flew this, I did that, whatever. No. And in fact, the program back, for example, under Reagan, was supervised directly by the vice president. That continued with Clinton and Bush administration, where they had pretty direct control, knowledge, etc., of those operations and report back to the president on it. And again, we were in the Cold War. There's still people that have missiles, even if it's just Iran throwing up, half a dozen intercontinental ballistic missiles. Well, having ability to keep a city from getting hit by a nuclear weapon, which do you want? We're in the Cold War right now. Putin's been talking about, nukes and threatening that it could be on again. And so do you want to let go of that technology while you still have intercontinental missiles? Probably not for the moment. Is it killing lots of people on the ground? That particular program is probably not. There, you could make a case how many are getting cancer because they're a little more susceptible and all that. If you're smart, you're doing certain things to help make yourself not readily right on the tipping point of getting sick from that. But that material is, relatively, and I know I got people jumping out of their chairs right now, relatively benign. Okay, I don't want to be the one that gets the one hot spot that somebody else, everybody else got fine. And by the way, and I'll get to your question here in a moment, but I want to answer this just going into it. It is a problem. These materials are like salts, and they do take on some of the other materials that I mentioned that are the stabilizers in the jet fuel. And so you noticed as these programs got really going in the early 90s and beyond, up past into the 2000s like that. For example, on the West Coast, because the air goes from west to east, the spraying was heavier in the western United States, and then allowing these materials to just filter out like a curtain across the country. And so they were doing all the early spraying, on the West Coast or just offshore of the West Coast very, very, very heavily. And the problem was that there is a percentage of it, especially with the way they were doing it in the early days, where more particulates, and it was all concentrated on the West, just by volume of the jet fuel that was going out there, more of it was falling through that area up there, 30 to 33,000 feet, where you wanted it to sit 29 to 30, and getting down to the surface. And so in the western forests, on the western side of the United States, you started seeing damage to the trees. And a lot of those particulates, they act like salt. Well, what did they do in the old days if you wanted to destroy the land where an enemy lived?
Yeah.
They would salt the earth, salt the areas where they would plant their food, and then you couldn't grow anything. So if you're sending down these salts through the atmosphere, salting the earth, you're destroying the growing area, you're hurting it. Well, it's one thing if it's a year. It's another thing if the program's been going on for 30 and 40 years.
Yeah.
And in the same stuff. They switched because of a specific incident that I won't go into for agreements. Something happened that was a result of this. And it was a very sad thing. And then it was understood that you had to spread this activity out. And so instead of just spraying north and south along the western coast of the United States and Canada, they lightened the load there radically and only allowed it to be sprayed in stitches so many miles at a time. And so you'll see aircraft where they're spraying and they stop after they've traveled a certain distance across the sky and they're no longer spraying.
Yeah.
And then they will either circle around or they'll go a certain distance further on that trajectory and start spraying again. So you don't get high concentrations in any area all at once. And and also across the country. And you'll notice that changed just around the 9/11 time period.
Okay.
Had nothing to do with the 9/11, by the way. Something else happened. And then the loads in various places, including in the western forests, was lightened radically. And so that allowed for a little bit of mending. At this exact moment in time, we're probably going to see an end of this program at the far side 10 years. I expect it to be done probably by the time that Trump leaves office. We have other systems that can defend much better, that don't require this type of thing. But the only thing that's in play here also is that, again, the weather control, because you have these particles there, you can put energy in.
Mm-hmm.
The weather is, run by energy, sunlight, and we can artificially do things that the sun does naturally with the water droplets in the air and with these materials in the air. And so for the moment, there's a couple of different aspects, including one of the people that I talked with not that far back. They had been modeling out how you turn this off. If you just turn it off today, we're done. For the weather system north of the equator to restabilize is going to take several cycles. And so they were looking at how do you turn this off with the least negative effect. And because there is effects to doing that. So easing out of it may take a few years when the decision is made. So even if you were to end it as a program at the end of the Trump administration, they may want to continue to be able to do some managing. And then you have a huge weather control operation out of Wright-Patterson and modeling all of these things. And it's military, they're not going to want to let go of this thing. They'll still want to have it available to them for various things. And part of the problem is this: getting that dust, if you will, into the atmosphere isn't a one-day job. That's why they're spraying it,
All the time.
All the time. They're not spraying it at night. They're spraying it at daytime because you need that sunlight, heat energy to dissipate the kerosene and like that the most effectively. And so that's why it's not done at night. The little bit that's done at night is usually something specific that they're trying to do to get ahead of something. So anyway, all of that said, I guarantee you all the people involved do understand this does have an effect at the surface. There is a concern for all of the people beneath it, and the equation that's being run on the other side is okay, it's relatively negligible. Would you like to lose 100,000, 250,000, 500,000 people because of a few nuclear devices, even if it's just North Korea or Canada? I mean, North Korea or Iran. All your Canadians jumped out of their seats. What? Don't accuse us of doing this stuff. We would never do that. Yeah, I know. Anyway, I don't know where that came from. But there's kind of a, there's more to it than a lot of people want to have the responsibility to think through. And the people involved are not monsters in that sense. This was done to protect us, save lives. And by the way, again, go back to the weather control. They killed a lot of people. Russia, Soviet Union specifically, killed a lot of Americans when they moved the jet stream around in that decade and a half. They were actively doing that and affecting weather in the United States. They killed probably real number, a couple thousand Americans. So this was done to save lives in this Cold War, this hidden war that was going on here in America over weather control. You don't put those materials up in a few minutes. The systems to do that are huge. I mean, it's the Manhattan Project. Okay, if you want it tomorrow, okay, well, we can have it for you in about a year. Okay, that's how problematic it is, because it's there's a lot to it, and you can go up and do a bunch of spraying. You can't get enough material in quickly to make enough of a difference rapidly to affect the weather the way that we're talking about these huge areas of weather like that. So anyway,
Ron, that's extremely helpful. A couple questions for you. So we had Steve Jarvis come on the show a few weeks ago, and you may know who he is. He's a regenerative farmer out in Idaho. He's working with RFK Jr. on reestablishing small farms across the U.S. And his number one thing is the fact that the soil is tainted and depleted, like these metals have depleted the nutrients and the minerals in the soils. Would you say that this program is responsible for that? Or do you think there's something else going on? Like there's another layer closer down to the surface where that may be responsible for that?
well, I'm very familiar with a lot of that part of the fight. There's no question that we're seeing more materials in the topsoil than we believe were present a long time ago. Of course, look, we've had a couple nuclear disasters that are fairly serious, and materials come from that normal industrialization, exhaust from across the planets there. There's a lot of pollutants that are getting in there. This material that's being sprayed is like a salt, and it does have the volumes are just almost unfathomable that are being sprayed daily. So is it measurable? Absolutely. Is there things that you can do that may help to break some of that up or lower the amount that's going into the plants? I think so. And I've looked at some of the stuff where people are saying, but it's just monstrously high, this and that, the other thing. If you look at the numbers, the amount that's being ingested by the plants is very, very, very minuscule in the stuff that I've seen. I'd be glad to take a look at what they're seeing and look at those numbers, but I've seen the stuff, one particular study that I can't go into detail on, but was looking at the effect in Yellowstone Park on certain materials where there's no other activity going on in there, and the brucellosis with the elk herd there. And when you looked at it and went to the source, it had zero to do with the atmospheric spraying. It had to do with a specific project that was going on in Utah and where the fallout was coming from. And that was stopped. And so, and moved to another part of the world. So, and the rest of the stuff from just the atmospheric spraying was extremely minuscule. You get more, look, just like I was talking about this company with the shipping location for trucks or for trains, trucks, and ships, and the dust there. In average life, you're getting a lot of stuff. We changed the fuels that are going into cars radically and reduced the exhaust gases and the leads and everything else coming out radically. People have no idea how much cleaner the air is than it was in the late 60s, early 70s, and into the 80s. We have really cleaned things up, and it's not due to electric. I can guarantee you that. So that has minimal effect on what's going on in the atmosphere at real numbers. So I think we're on the right path. And if anything, if I was going to look at the food that we're getting, my main concern would be that it has to do with the fertilizers that are used and the over use of the soils where they don't get a chance to regenerate the rest of the minerals that you need for adequate mineralization of the food we're eating. So you're not getting the nutrients, you're not getting the iodine, you're not getting the trace minerals that were present in the food where we had magnesium too. Yeah, Jed mentioned that that you need to get proper nutrition. And so looking at our practices so that you get the most nutrient dense food may be more important, probably is more important at this point in time than what is in the soil that could be a problem to you. My personal opinion, I'm more than glad to look at stuff and consider other things. That's why, though, I'm looking at doing large-scale greenhouse operations and very sharp pencil expenses for farmers wanting to switch a portion of their operations into greenhouse operations. We can control the nutrient density better. We can control the environmental factors better, including especially the water, where we're getting water to the plants in hydroponics or misting or other things. There's a big fight kind of going on behind the scenes. It's not a fight, but it's a contest. Which is better, going to soil-based growth systems, plant systems, or to hydroponic or water or mist-based systems? What grows the tastiest, healthiest foods? And so you'll see at farmers markets, guys, soil-based on stuff, because think of all the trace minerals that you get in various things, and is the soil where you're growing something, is it weak or strong enough? Things like mint up in Idaho, you can only grow mint for so many seasons in an area, and then it's done. Why? Because it pulls so much nutrients out of the soil that you're very limited on what you can grow in that same area for a while the soil recovers, and other plants that you should plant in the area that help to, put nutrients back into the soil. So the converse is, if you want a high nutrient dense food, a little bit of mint brings a lot of nutrients with it. Why? Because it's a plant that sucks the nutrients out of the soil very hard and vacuums it up. So certain foods, there's cycles to it. Are you getting food that's the tail end of the amount of nutrients left in a piece of soil? Is the farmer rotating crops adequately? Right. A lot of things going on there. So, or even where you have what I think is just extremely interesting, and I've got to leave here momentarily, so I've got to bow out here momentarily, but you have no plow farming systems, where we see all the tractors out there mowing down and grinding up and tilling the soil at the end of the year before you start the planting and all that. What they do is they just knock down the plants at the end of the growing season and leave them right where they're at. When they come in the next year to plant, they plant right through that hubris right on top and grow the next season through that hubris. And I was with one of the farmers a while back that was doing a no plow system. And I was shocked when he was showing me what was going on with the material. He says, here's my neighbor's runoff. It was raining. He had to stop the truck and show me, look, you know. And so in these huge fields, his neighbor, the runoff was brown. I mean, a dark brown. He says, there's all your nutrients going right down to the river. It's leaving the property. You know, it's washing it out. That soil is going to be, he's ruining this farm because he's plowing. He's spending all that money on gas and energy to plow that field up. On his side, he was doing no plow. He was just knocking it down and leaving it right where it was at. If he did anything, it was a very light till, but he was keeping all the fabric of the material of the previous years of crops right where it's at and letting it digest into the ground and become the fertilizer for the future. But the other thing is it's a filter. That mat, when the rain hit it, and it was a hard rain, at the edge of his field where the water was running off, it was crystal clear. None of my nutrients going downstream. They're not going to the river. Okay? You get down the stream, and the river's cloudy where his stuff's going. It's clean for the fish. It's beautiful. You know. So a no plow system keeps the nutrients right where it's at. And when you check the nutrient density of his soil, he could plant earlier and he could wait to harvest later because that mat provided a certain insulation and protection and security and strength for the crop. The other guy got wiped out by a rain. He was mentioning a couple of years earlier. His didn't get wiped out from the rain because it had more density in the soil to hold up. And the crop came up stronger. So there's lots and lots of parts of the equation that have to be dialed in. And guys sometimes get in a bubble with what they're seeing or saying because it's, you know, they've got their zone that everybody knows them by. It's worth looking at it. And knowing he's up there in Idaho, I'd love to pop in and take a look at it and see what they're seeing because there's a lot of different, you know, things going on here. And that's what's fun. We have real geniuses, experts applying their life energy to solving some of these problems. And I am glad. We should all be thankful that we have those people doing that. And I'd love to see what he's seeing and you know, what can be applied to what he's doing and what might be improved with some of the other stuff people are doing too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put y'all in touch. I think it'd be great for the two of you to connect. So I'll be sure and connect you by text. One last question for you. I know you have to run. Is there anything well, I'll tell you, I have a little theory that Trump's plan for a Golden Dome, the move from the Iron Dome to the Golden Dome, is that have anything to do with the kind of particulates we'll see in the sky? Like, I was just thinking that maybe it would mean that we would have something non-toxic in the sky, or maybe they would actually use gold because it would still reflect in the sky. Is that too out there, Juan?
Well, there's atomic levels of, you know, we have atomic oxygen, we have atomic gold or silver. And there's been cases made for doing that because there's a certain lens effect that we can do if it's done at high enough altitude out, you know, towards space, you know, 60, 80, 90 miles up. But the volumes would be pretty high. We have enough on the Earth to do it, but that's probably quite a ways out. What he's really talking about is the fact that we don't have to do it with chemical rockets, which are very caustic. We don't have to do it with stuff down in the ozone layer. We can do it with lasers, and that's the defensive system that we're moving to. And
so the gold
with
is light.
that new technology, well, if you wanted to spray, and that's
Okay.
not what they're going to do. In what he's doing, it's more the principle that we're just using light energy to do what we have to do. We don't need that dustification stuff.
Okay.
And by the way, the Earth is not heating up; it is cooling. And that early stuff was there. It's just not cooling, you know, very much in a lot of the places. but it's also heating. For example, we have up in Alaska and the northern climes, we have glaciers that are growing, not just receding like we've had. And that was stuff that most people, what are you talking about? No, we're melting. It's not. It appears that it has to do with magnetic field lines coming in from the sun. And so depending on where you decide to measure, some areas are getting bigger in the glacification, and 50 miles away, it's getting less because it's following certain tracks that have to do with the flow of magnetic energy across the surface of the Earth. So where you measure might be as important as the measuring itself. And it's more complex than most people are understanding. What Trump is talking about with protecting us from people wanting to hit us with missiles is let's move away from these things that are dirty and messed up and going to things that have a prayer of actually defending you from not just the current technology but future technologies, which again are going to, these energy weapons. Look, and this is just one little glint. Maybe we can talk more about it,
Sure.
the next time. But the systems that were used in California in the Paradise and Palisades fires, the system that was used in Maui against them, those are directed energy weapons. Zero question about it.
Yeah.
I'll go to court, get us in a courtroom. We haven't been able to get there yet, and prove it 9 ways from Sunday. Who had the authority to use those weapons? And by the way, they weren't used on U.S. soil by China or Russia. Who had the authority to engineer those systems to do what they did, under what auspices, what authorities? Those are crimes. Those are murder scenes. Okay, those are homicides. They were not an act of nature. These weapons can be used in a lot of different ways, and we have people within our systems. Those are militarized systems that were not done by private companies, private groups, used against American citizens. And I would contend 9/11 falls in the same category. When we get to that agency that's been playing these kinds of games, people will need to hang. We will not. They did it with knowledge. They did it because they were geoengineering for the planet and moving us to their 15-minute cities and everything else. There's a huge war that's got to come, and the only way we get to the bottom line there won't be the FBI or the governors or the legislature and the Senate. It will have to be, because of the ways in which that technology is held within the military defense system, it will have to be commander-in-chief, executive, presidential commission to get to the bottom of who had the authorities and made the orders and deployed those systems to be used in those locations and for what purposes. And was it legal? Was it constitutional? Which it wasn't. And to deal with that and their alliances with global groups. These are serious things that, unfortunately, while people might think Trump should this, Trump should that, he should have done this already. There's layers and levels to this game that you have to get through. He hasn't even got 150 appointments cleared by the House and Senate yet. Most of any president in the last 125 years, more than anybody else, they're fighting a war with him to keep him from being able to do stuff. Yeah. So we got one hell of a fight ahead of us. And then, by the way, just as a closing thought, you're talking about what are all the metals, what are all the contaminants, the pollutants. I talked about the nutrients. I guarantee you the most damaging thing to every single person in this audience, you better pay attention, isn't any of those. more people in this audience are dying because of parasitic exposure than anything to do with the nutrients, with the pollutants, etc. Even the metals, that talking about that are in some of the surfaces like that. Yeah. Well, and the lack of minerals that your system has, your immune system isn't able to defend itself, but also the metals in there. Hulda Clark, who was a friend of mine around, 30 plus years ago, she was doing amazing work looking at parasitic loads in the human population.
Yeah.
And showing that it was increasing, and the variety was increasing for a lot of different reasons. If you address the parasitic loads in your body and getting the things that keep those parasitic loads under control and even reverse it, you've done more for your health than any other single thing you probably could do today. And by the way, there's about 30,000 different parasites that we find in the human situation around the world. Lots of different varieties like that. There's a dozen or so main groups, and they're all a little bit different. So you want to knock down that parasitic load. That's why Jennifer put together. She has a kind of a cheat sheet, on the parasite stuff. She's got a thing over at her site, jennifermack.com. Got to put the in there.
Yeah, cool. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, because I want to save people's lives. If you knock down the parasitic load, and you could have different kinds, and you could have one load, and your kids or your neighbor have a different load for different reasons: diet, exposure, age, all sorts of things. You want to knock that down, eliminate it, and then if you've got some kind of an opportunistic disease, as Hulda said, all disease is traceable to two primary things: the parasites and the metals that are in your system for various reasons, exposures, even the utensils you eat from, knives, forks, spoons, pans, etc. In Hulda's work, she showed the difference in the way that your system reacted to the presence of those metals, and they create different types of opportunities for different types of parasitic loads to get a grip in your body. And so you can get parasitic loads that are in the kidneys, the liver. They can show up as kidney stones, fecal stones, things like that. And then also you have molds, talking about old and moldy. Well, when doctors do autopsies, they see molds literally on the brain tissue. And so even with Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that, it's probably ultimately going to be proven in our lifetime, probably in the next few years, definitively, not even as a question the way it's stated right now, that those molds are the real ultimate cause of the loss of brain function.
Wow.
And Alzheimer's and dementia like that. And I was just with a great doctor friend of mine in Africa. He actually went to prison in South Africa because he became known as the doctor that was curing AIDS.
Wow.
And he could do it in as little, in lab research, lab verified work, not just, opium. He could show that in 16 days, he was eliminating the AIDS virus in the bodies. And then You'd have to maintain that till it was completely flushed out, but he could bring it down below a level where, you would test for AIDS. And he was doing it with hydrogen peroxide. There's his version was with 40%. He was using it intravenously, very, very small amounts. I mean, you don't just do it at home for these types of particular effects. But he was taking people that were literally on their last step and getting them where they came back and functional and lived a full life.
Amazing.
With the bloods, a lot of the blood diseases, which is his specialty. He's got a couple PhDs. He's one of the top people in the world. But he was a threat to the pharmaceutical companies that were making unbelievable amounts of money. He was only treating the poorest people. He was doing it as a mission. Literally contributing his life to this and wasn't out to make a buck. Yet they threw him in prison because he was disrupting the machine. The blood level parasitic infections. Again, the cures for these things, the treatments for these things are relatively simple to knock down that parasitic load, that opportunistic parasitic load. And I think that's where you have to. Parasites are all through our environment, the water, the food, the stuff you touch, other people that have something from somewhere far away, your animals, your cats, birds. I got very sick several decades ago because I was in an environment where I was exposed to bird feces over a period of about a week. That were fairly dense. Never gave it a thought, didn't think a thing about it. And 3-4 months later, I was very, very sick in my lungs. And it took several months before, it was almost a year, before somebody, Hulda Clark, in fact, figured out you've been exposed to bird feces, haven't you? Here's the parasites that are in your lungs. This is what's causing all the rest of the problems. It's in your mucus and everything else. And so it took about a month. I had relief in 5 or 6 days, but it took about a month to clear a lot of that. She was using the zapper primarily, and then you've got magnetic pulsers and things like that. That's all in Jen's stuff in her cheat sheet that she has.
Awesome.
And she's also, we've got the same thing over at my site over at gumroad.com. And so I'll shoot you over those links, but those will help people tremendously. They're worth every penny. She's got them in a package in both places. And I think it would benefit everybody in the audience to understand this. I can do more to help people, I think, getting you to concentrate on knowing there's a parasitic issue. Even you mentioned Robert Kennedy.
Yeah. Robert
Kennedy, a lot of people don't know this. He was having brain fog and other issues many years ago. He writes about it in his book. And they're looking at him doing all this stuff. They finally figured out he had a 4-inch parasite in his brain.
That's so wild.
So there's a person that everybody here in the audience knows who's talked about it. They found a 4-inch parasite in his brain. Think about that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're immune. Every person in this audience is exposed to parasites all day long. Question is, do they get some extra opportunity by something going on in your lifestyle or stress that's brought down your ability to kind of keep them in check? Or have they just been around in your system long enough that they finally are overtaking it? Old age is less to do potentially with actually getting old than all the things they're trying to kill you getting the upper hand. And you got to get the upper hand back. And some of that's a bit more aggressive. And I think at this exact moment, we all need to be a little bit more aggressive. And then the last thing I'll say on this, you were mentioning all of the drones running along the East Coast looking for nuclear weapons specifically. Trump even told you that back during the campaign. But beyond that, one of the other things that has been discussed behind the scenes pretty consistently is there was some of these very large drones that are used for farming operations. So we're doing spraying, and we see increased parasites of certain types in those areas. And there's been quite a bit of speculation behind the scenes that, in fact, that was intentional based on what they were spraying. It wasn't an accident of the process and related to farming operations run by China. So that's not a death sentence. It's not the end of the world. It just means that you need to be aware of the fact that you may want to attack this, and the treatments are actually very, very inexpensive. They're very, personal, with certain of the nutrients, iodine being a very big thing. One of the guys said here recently in one of the things talking on this, if I had to go to a desert island, I could only take one thing with me for my health, it'd be iodine.
Wow.
And different iodines operate differently in the way that they propagate in the body. And so there's some that are better than others. Jen goes into that in the cheat sheet and who she likes and why, and she's used all the stuff there. So I just say all that. At the end of the day, I need everybody here intact. We all got to get over the finish line together. This is a team effort. For all the things that Trump can and is doing, if we don't get through this intact, then it was all for naught. So I need everybody here in the fight with us and win by the numbers. It's more. And by the way, ivermectin, Jen just mentioned something to me. It only hits about 20% of the parasites. So if you've been taking ivermectin, fenbendazole, other things, great, fantastic. And you may have noticed a huge difference, but there's other stuff where you didn't notice a difference. Well, that's because you may have a parasitic load that's in other areas of the spectrum that's dominant.
Yeah.
So the ivermectin, farmers use it for the horses because they get parasites. You go get dog dewormer. Why? Because they can get a heartworm.
Yeah.
And it'll kill them. How many people are in here worried about, the cholesterol when they actually should be thinking about a heartworm?
Well, so true. And it's very clear that, I had no idea that there was some indication that they were spraying this soil to either propagate parasites or put parasites.
One of the places was out in Idaho. You talk about Jarvis,
Wow.
he's looking at stuff. One of the sites was there in the Idaho-Oregon border area. So, I know there's continuing looks at that. It's very hard to using those types of biologicals to take over, but it's very possible, especially when you have fog conditions like that. So there's a lot goes into that part of the conversation. I'm just telling you generically, as a country, let's all be a little bit more aware of what's going on. And then the nutrient stuff, by the way, last thing I'll say on this, it's not just the foods that you're eating, but how they're prepared.
Yeah.
For example, with the breads, people back in the turn of the century, last century, people actually were tracking that the pre-ground flour that was going out into the food system, where it's ground and it might not be used for months or years after the flour was ground up, had a different biological effect on people than freshly ground flour and then baked immediately. The nutrients weren't the same. And so there was quite a bit of work done back in the 20s where it was being established that even mental disorders could be tied very directly to the fact that the nutrients that people were getting with the cereals and the breads, it's not a gluten issue. It's a nutrient issue because when it's freshly ground and then baked, all kind of in the same day, the nutrient density and digestibility is very high. As soon as you let it sit for a couple of days, the ability to get all the nutrients that you need goes down radically. They literally are, depleted over time out of the flowers and like that, because of the way that you're waiting for weeks even before it's turned into bread and baked into position. So there's a very strong move right now to go to freshly baked breads with freshly ground grains. And in fact, in the stuff that I'm looking at for Africa, that will be a key component. When you go to freshly ground flours and then immediately go to baking it all within the same day, the way that the body absorbs those nutrients and the amount of nutrients that the body gets is radically higher. And so to help in those locations where these populations are in just brutal shape, yet right this second, Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda, just the kids, not counting the adults, it's about 50-50. Just the kids, you have 2.5 million that are right on the brink of starvation because of the wars going on right in that area, and that have to have nutrients. Well, I'm going to send them in a care package from UNICEF, of stuff that was packaged 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Okay, beautiful, wonderful, I got it. In reality, it may get them through the day or the week or the month. It may not actually bring them back to true health. And so we need to look at how can we actually improve the nutrient density and digestibility of what they're getting, and do it in a more local way. And we're going to try to do that, plus all the pollutants from everything else that's in the environment around them, the way it's done. And by the way, that area is one of the easiest places in the world to grow food, and yet people starving because of all the bullshit going on. It's just grinding. So anyway, there you go. I appreciate that your audience allowed me to go on and on. I wanted to take some extra time with you because we didn't get to cover this stuff before. I hope I didn't have people's brains melt or eyes cross too much over going into all the minutia, but hopefully that kind of helps with that subject for your audience.
It was incredibly helpful to me and got great feedback in the chat. So thank you so much, Juan, and thanks to Jen as well for lending you for that time. We really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. And I would love to be in touch with your doctor in South Africa. I don't, it breaks my heart to say this, but I used to work for Pfizer in government affairs in Africa, and I would travel to South Africa pretty frequently in that job, talking to government officials about how, getting drugs into the country and those kinds of things. So I'd love to hear about some of the stuff that he's facing, because we probably know some of the same players.
Well, let me just say this. He's one of a number, and I'm looking forward to working through some issues that they're working on right now and going more public. It probably won't be till next year that we are comfortable to do that for various logistical reasons. But I'll tell you this, some of the greatest patriots, men of God on the planet are the ones that I got to hang out with even over the last few weeks, that are working at breakneck speed against every mobster group, political business that you can imagine on the planet, just to help and save lives. These are people that could go out and make massive incomes with their skill sets, and yet they're focused on trying to save a generation of kids. And like the conversation we had the other day up in Johannesburg, to get the kids, to get that area back on track. And this was a place where you had world-class business architecture, everything else, just a generation ago. To get them back on track, it's probably going to take about 2.5 generations, just for comparison. And it's a brutal number to hear, but I'll just take a second and tell you this, that in that region around Johannesburg, where they're burning all the garbage, they're living in filth, it's just horrendous. In some of the work that's done there, you have an average IQ now of about 70. Well, what's that? Is that just you didn't get educational opportunities? Is it nutrients? Is it pollutants? Is it just the communications and things like that? I could go on and on about that.
Wow.
So when you have other people that are coming in and have higher IQs, do you blame those people that are only working at the lower IQ? It's not genetic.
Right. No, it's not genetic.
It's
not
other
natural
things
at
going
all.
on.
Yeah.
It's not natural. It's because, and at some level, if you can't turn it around there, that would be where you'd end up more and more and more as a planet with literally a very advanced culture right beside a very de-advanced culture. And then those people that are caught up in that, you can help them, you can work them, to become functional, but they're almost certainly never going to be able to compete with a properly fed, environmentally sound, educated group. And then a lot of that is intergenerational to help the next one of that. You literally are probably 2.5 generations from being able to work right again.
Wow.
And that is a crime against humanity,
Yes.
a crime against all those people. The quicker we get in there and help those that can be helped, the better off we all are. And some of it, look, the pygmies up in the Congo, they're just smaller. They're short people. They're not tall. And when the pygmy husband wakes up in the morning, they get married, 14, 15 years old, because they're all dead by 30.
Wow.
When he wakes up and his 14 or 15-year-old wife has the newborn baby, what's the first thing in his mind? What are they going to eat today? They don't have a refrigerator. They live in the trees. And they're very simple people. They are Christians. Most all of them, they have a belief in God. They're just simplistic people that are just barely at the edge of, the way they've lived for thousands of years. And he just figures out, he gets up, he's going to figure out where he's going to get food, which plants are available. Is his buddy going to help him? Are they going to get, some type of wild animal and they can put some stuff together and cook it? They're very simplistic. It's not their fault that this is all they know. They didn't have to worry about a city. They don't punch a clock 9 to 5. They're very vulnerable to everything that is society. They're not worried about can they mine anything out of the mine and do it coherently. They're just somebody else's cannon fodder for a more advanced situation. Let me just finish the whole conversation this way. What those people wanted with only 500 million people on the planet with the Georgia Guidestones, the way some of these breakaways are operating that are in play around the world that want a one world government where they can burn the world down like Nero did in Rome and rebuild it in their own vision. They have access to technology just like what was used with the directed energy weapons at Palisades, Paradise, Maui, that if you can't get them under control, you're as dumb and stupid and vulnerable as those people with the 70 IQ, as those pygmies just coming out of the wilderness. to their access to AI, higher technology, all the other advanced stuff. This is a God moment, but for the hand of God, we won't survive their madness. You're going to be as caught in the middle of it as those merchants and people that came in from all over the countryside to sell their wares in Rome and died in the fire because of the ambition of one man and his troops going out starting the fire just when the afternoon winds came up and burning the world down for their gain advancement. They're all listening to the devil himself. Yeah. So let me just say a quick prayer with your audience before I leave. Father God, we know that there's so much going on in the world, so far advanced beyond who we are, where we are, what we know or understand. We get occupied with the world around us, make sure our kids are fed when we wake up in the morning, that we get the paycheck in, that we car still works and is running to be able to get back and forth to work, or things that we have to do in a society running around, and that we depend on things that are ultimately out of our direct control in many ways, honest votes to get people that are into office that are the ones we actually elected, the things we actually want them to do in our behalf, not somebody else's, not bought and paid for by somebody else who can manipulate our lives from thousands of miles away, a world away. The devil and his minion seek our destruction, seek that one world global dominance. But you have the leaves that line the river, the center of your holy city, the leaves on those trees that give their fruit in season annually, but the leaves of those trees are for the healing of the nations. And in fact, you created the nations. You want the nations. You want that individuality. You want the individuality of our genetics, our different families. And out through time, from where we are right now, we pray that you would preserve us as children of Abraham, children of promise, an earthly seed and a heavenly seed, not just to populate the earth and the solar system and the area around us, but to populate galaxies according to your will, Father God. Thy will be done. Protect every person in this audience. Give them the knowledge and the wisdom to exercise it in order to be healthy, in order to make gains so they have hands that are full with which to minister and to help the people around them, and that are strong in order to pull up the people around them and help them stand on their own feet, so that we as individuals can work with strong teams around us, and that we as a nation, once we get our nation back under control, before you, Father God, according to your will, to be about the covenant work that was planned all the way back to the pilgrims that came here and founded this Christian nation, that we would be able, as a country, as a people, to have the luxury to be able to go out into the world, not to be our brother's keeper, but to be our brother's brother, to do the beautiful things that you would have us do, to be your instruments of beauty and righteousness, art, kindness, health, healing, out into the world according to your will, that we would be instruments in your hands to do amazing and beautiful things that please you, Father God. You created us for your pleasure, and we desire to do pleasant, beautiful, fun, interesting things with that which you've given us, and to enjoy the company of each other before you, Father God. We thank you that you make this possible. We look forward to being part of that. I pray for each person in this audience that they would have health, abundance, all of their provisions met, that they would be delivered from evil, and they would be able to be instruments of good and to bring a holy message, a divinely inspired message via the blood of Christ, healing and life eternal in your presence, Father God, without sin. No shadow of darkness in any person in this audience forever and ever. Radiant with your radiance, according to your will, Father God. I pray all of this in Jesus' name, who makes this all possible by his blood, by his sacrifice. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Juan. That was so beautiful, and we're so blessed to have you today. Thank you again for your time, and thanks again to Jen for sharing you, and we will be talking to you soon.
All right. Beautiful. I appreciate all the time. I'm glad I got to take a bit extra. I couldn't have done that any other days except just today. And now I got to get to work and get all my stuff done before sunset. So, anyway, beautiful, folks.
Thank you. God bless.
All right.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. It was a bit of an extended time, but what a blessing and what an education. We will be back with you on Tuesday with Louisiana's AG, Liz Murrill, to talk about her case against the kids' gaming app that's been a haven for predators, Roblox. And we may also get into the latest on the congressional redistricting issue because I believe she was up at the Supreme Court earlier this week. So with that, we will see you at 10 a.m. Central on Tuesday, and say a prayer for Chris that he fully recovers. Have a great rest of your week. We will see you soon. If you're looking to invest in physical precious metals or convert your 401k to a precious metals backed IRA, please consider making your investment with our trusted partner, MetalStacks. Their prices regularly beat the big sites, and they have no credit card fees or minimums. Shipping is free for orders over $500. Just visit metalstacks.com/dwalker or get there from our website, freedomstate.us. If you're interested in the IRA conversion, drop me a message at Danielle@freedomstate.us and I can get you connected with their white glove service. Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.